Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Henry.
Thanks very much. If you're wondering what the microphone is for, it's for the camera, just to clear up that little mystery. Thank you all very much for coming out. I never know quite what to expect when I arrive at events. And I hear we've had trouble finding a venue for this evening as well, which sadly is something we're probably going to have to get used to, especially with the Antifa lot intimidating and bullying their way around as they usually do. But what I'll do this evening is I'll talk a little bit about For Britain, about what I want us to be, what I want the party to do, and the kind of vision and the kind of country I want us to offer to the British public, the kind of Britain that we want to build. And I'll tell you how this amazing success that we've already had. Sometimes I forget that we've only actually been doing this a few weeks. And we've achieved such an incredible amount in just a few weeks. And since when the UKIP leadership election ended, which obviously ended very well for me, looking back on it. It was the best possible result. I beat everyone except the winner. Well, afterwards, we had a clarity from UKIP as to what now separates this party from them. And what separates us is that we are not, For Britain will not be politically correct, particularly around the most difficult issues. And the most difficult issues are immigration and Islam. Now, UKIP is going to be politically correct on that, but I'm not going to talk about UKIP. I'm going to talk about For Britain. I want us, the party that I envisage, and I really do think we can succeed. I think we're timing, in life timing is everything. And I think the timing is right for us now. There's a real sweeping change. And every so often things really do change. We're so used to the Labour-Tory swapping, this two-party state we live in. We're so used to it that people think, oh, you never get anywhere. You'll sit on the fringes. You might act as a guide, a barometer for other parties. That is not my intention at all. I am not here to give lessons to other parties on what policies they ought to have. And when we grow in popularity, which we will, and they start then pretending to care about those issues and trying to sort of steal back momentum, a bit like the Tories did with Brexit to steal back momentum from UKIP, there's no way I'll be backing down. If they will only act when forced to, then they can't be trusted. They're only doing it for political reasons, and we will make sure the British public understand that. So when they start talking about Islam, for example, to try and steal our thunder, we'll make sure the public knows that's what they're doing. And the public is not stupid. The public get this. They really do get it. So I'm not here to act as a barometer or as a guide to the political mainstream. I'm here to get rid of them. They don't deserve to be in power. And they don't deserve to be in power because they've spent the last 5 or 6 decades betraying this country. Betraying it. They truly have. They've absolutely transformed it. So what kind of party I want us to be? I want us to stand out for our plain speaking, our honesty, and our common sense. This is the USP. This is the selling point. We will not toe the line no matter how difficult it might get. We will not toe the line. And I want us to tell harsh truths. I want people to know statistics. I want people to know statistics of how many people have come into this country over the last 5 or 6 decades and over the last decade and what it's actually doing to us. Because we want a Britain that we recognise. This is what For Britain is calling for. A Britain that we know and that we recognise. And this massive transformation that's taken place in the last few decades, we're not saying that, people say Britain is a nation of immigrants. Nonsense. There has always been, for as long as there's been travel essentially, immigration of some sort. But we're talking about a city the size of Coventry every year. This is unprecedented. It is unprecedented, and it's been going on for several years now, and we're still being told to shut up about it. We're still being told to shut up about it, and it keeps going. Now you cannot integrate a city the size of Coventry every year. It is impossible. It is impossible for those people to become part of Britain and to become British, either down through generations or within one generation. We want people to become part of Britain or not come at all. We want to stop this segregation, these separate communities, this several different languages being spoken, children in school whose first language is not English, if they have any English at all. This is not a unified country. This is scarcely a country. We have to unite behind the identity of this country, and to do that we have to know what the identity of the country is. It's a Britain that is free, that is democratic, that is sovereign, that has freedom of speech, that has political and religious freedom, and it has a parliament in London which answers to us, not to the European Union, not to the United Nations, but to us. And this massive gap between politician and public is because they don't answer to us. This massive gap. Mainstream politicians lie to us all the time. They lie to us all the time, and they do it because they hold the public in something similar to contempt. They think the public is stupid. They think they know best, and they will decide what we do. And the electorate is a problem to overcome every 5 years or so, rather than a master to answer to. I want us to be the bridge of that gap. I want us to close that gap between politics and people, and remember who the boss is. The boss is the voter. The boss is the person who gets up out of bed on a Thursday every few years and goes out and marks that ballot paper. That's who we answer to, and that's who we speak to. And we won't hold back important information because we think we know best, and the little people are not capable of dealing with this kind of information. We will tell people the truth. We will tell people the truth. And that includes, and I was saying this in the car on the way over, that includes when we don't know things. You know, have you seen a Diane Abbott interview? I actually saw this again 2 days ago. The classic Diane Abbott, where the Sky News reporter was asking her about a report that she claimed she had read, and he kept pushing her for specifics on these policies, and she hadn't got a clue. She hadn't got a clue what she was talking about because she clearly never read it, but she kept pretending that she had. She made herself a laughingstock. This was a kind of an obvious one, but politicians do this all the time. They pretend they know things they can't possibly know, and they make fools of themselves. I want us to be completely different. I want us to, if we don't know something, like I said to you, Clive, we don't know something, say, I don't know that. I'll find out, and I'll get back to you. This is the kind of honesty people want. It builds trust. If you pretend you know everything, if you pretend you're a saint as well. We can't pretend we're saints. Politicians do it all the time. They think it's a sign of weakness to be wrong about something. It isn't. It's a sign of strength to be able to admit to being wrong about something, because we're all wrong about something sometimes. It's a sign of strength. This is the kind of honesty I want us to have with the electorate. I want us to tell harsh truths. I want us to admit when we're wrong and to admit when we don't know something. This builds trust. This builds trust. And when the electorate begins to trust you, they will tell their friends, have you seen this new party? Have you seen the things they're saying? It will spread. It will spread by word of mouth, and we will grow. I also want us to be the party of common sense and pro-British policies. And what I mean by that is the British people must come first. The British people must come first. We've seen it again this week, where a judge ruled that migrant children, and we're not allowed to know if they're children or not, because we're not allowed to do any tests on them because dental tests are racist, are to be given priority by legal ruling, are to be given priority over native Brits when it comes to schooling and the NHS. What kind of kick in the teeth is this? Not only is the British taxpayer supposed to support the whole world and fund the whole world, but now the whole world is being given priority over them. So it's a matter of pay up and shut up and like it. And if you complain, you're a racist. This madness keeps happening. So I want us to put British people first. And when it comes to council housing, I want British people put first. There shall be no priority of any kind for migrants in the NHS. And in fact, if you come to this country, if you have the money to come to this country, then you have the money, frankly, to take out a health insurance policy. It is not fair to expect the British taxpayer to fund healthcare for the whole world. It's not fair. And while doing it, British people are missing out more and more and more. This has to stop. This has to stop. The NHS has to be reformed. Now, I know we hear this from every political party, but I actually mean it. And if we were to reform it, it would cost us money. But in the longer term, if we get rid of waste and get rid of health tourism, the NHS can thrive. If we don't do that, we will lose it. And I don't want us to lose it, because if we lose it, it is the poorest people in Britain who will pay the price as usual. They will be expected to take out health insurance policies which won't pay out when they're sick. All the usual stuff. It is the poorest who will suffer, and it's for the poorest we have to defend these things. We have to defend our public sector as an aid to the British people. And we can only do that if we stop waste and stop politically correct left-wing lunacy from destroying it, and it is destroying it. The NHS is far, far more concerned with diversity than it is with providing good healthcare to the British people. Far, far more concerned. There are doctors and nurses all through the NHS now, and I'm talking to senior consultants as well, whose English is poor at best, and we're expecting them to deal with often elderly British people who are too polite to complain, and so will, I believe, be left in complete confusion as to what's going on. We have, and the NHS is going further and further, and £2 billion a year is spent on health tourism, people coming here to use the NHS and then going home. All of this has to stop. This layer of bureaucracy has to stop, and it has to stop across the public sector. Obsessed with diversity, obsessed with hate crime, and giving up on real crime. And they're not even ashamed or embarrassed about this stuff. They're not even they admit it. They'll put out tweets about how they are determined. This came from the CPS on Twitter, that they are determined to track down and to end all types of hate crime. Hate crime, by the way, is defined by them as including unfriendliness. So if you're unfriendly, it's a hate crime. Meanwhile, several people's daughters are being gang raped down the street, but the CPS can't get enough evidence on it. This is the absurdity. It's a complete betrayal. The British taxpayer is paying for these things. It's paying for the NHS, it's paying for the CPS, and getting absolutely nothing but insulted and left behind and abandoned by it all. Police as well. I could go on all day about the police. I won't, but I could. It is a farce. Policing in this country is an absolute farce. Not only are they cutting it by massive numbers because they can't afford it, apparently they can't afford policing, but what they can afford is awareness-raising days. This is now the role of the police, to raise awareness about every possible social issue there is. And while they're on social media raising awareness of this and that, or painting their nails, or putting on high heels, or whatever it might be, assaults and burglaries are no longer being investigated in London. They actually admit it. The Metropolitan Police said, well, you're not going to investigate most burglaries and assaults anymore. Meanwhile, 900 plus specialist hate crime officers are employed by the Crown Prosecution, or by the Metropolitan Police. And what they're doing is leaving crime alone and policing our thoughts, policing our opinions. That's what hate crime is. It's a policing of opinions. And that is their priority. So they're not going to sort out all the trouble we have, all the crime we have, much of it related to immigration. They're not going to touch that. They're going to instead control how much we know about it and what we're allowed to say about it. And that is now the role of the police, to sanitise and prioritise and promote minority cultural practices, for example, like the horrors of child marriage and FGM, which go on under our noses and the police don't give a damn about it. What they do is hand over control of these things to community leaders. They have essentially abandoned parts of the country to outsiders to govern. This is so very serious, and I just don't hear anyone in politics talking about it. I don't hear anyone in politics talking about it. And as for the European Union, blimey, where do I start? I believe that we have a 5-year transition period between now and this date we're supposed to get out of the European Union. That, by the way, is complete nonsense. That date they claim to have put into law is complete nonsense. It cannot be enforceable. But we have this transition period, I believe, and this is what I want for Britain to tell the British public, in order to give the elite, the establishment elite, the EU/British government elite, time to arrange a second referendum and time to propagandise and to spend, like they did in Ireland. You might remember there was a Lisbon Treaty referendum and the people voted against it. And the EU were very upset about this because they're not supposed to vote in a way that they're told. They are supposed to vote in the way that they're told, and if they don't, the EU gets very upset. So a year or so of EU money pumped into a propaganda campaign throughout Ireland, telling people that you will be starving in the streets if you don't vote for the Lisbon Treaty. The economy will collapse, all very familiar, isn't it? Our economy is going to collapse as well if you don't vote for the Lisbon Treaty. Oh, and by the way, you're also a racist and a fascist and a bigot if you don't vote for the Lisbon Treaty. While later, a second referendum held, it passes. Same thing here, only on a much grander scale, so they can't be quite so obvious about it. But that is the idea. It really is the idea. The EU does not like people asserting any authority, independent authority inside this bloc. It was intended and designed to remove our voice from the political sphere. It was intended for it. And they've never been shy or embarrassed about it either. And this always really puzzles me, is how can we, when they're showing us to our faces how corrupt and disgusting they are, we still don't seem to, as a country, we still don't seem to see it. And the reason for that is a media bias. The media is dominated, as we know, by open border leftists who are obsessed with the concept that we should all melt into one. I'm particularly obsessed with the idea that Europe, particularly white Europe, needs to disappear. And this is another one that nobody else will talk about, and I will, because people out there are sick of it. The anti-white propaganda that is sweeping across the Western world. Now, I have no bigotry or any kind of ill feeling towards any race, but I also have no ill feeling towards my own race. And I will not stand by and say nothing. People out there, they don't want racism, actual racism, but they don't want to be insulted and degraded because they're white either. And this is what angers people, this total double standard. That it's, you know, we have black community groups who speak on the perspective of black people. Fine, fully appreciate that. But try having a conversation from the perspective of white people. You'll find yourself quite possibly in jail. This is where we are, and people are tired of it. And if we don't deal with it with a bit of decency, and I mean real neo-Nazis might. And this is something that I think for Britain is going to be key. It's going to be key. You know, UKIP once said it was a filter of the far right, and they were right, it was. They did give a place for people to go who were concerned about immigration, who were concerned about multiculturalism, who were concerned about Islam to a degree, to stop them going to people like the BNP, or worse. Now, I want us to do exactly the same thing when it comes to the big one, the I word. Now, we have a lot of policies, and I don't know if you followed me during the UKIP leadership election. I was called a one-issue candidate, and I was called a one-issue candidate because down is the new up, and I was the candidate with the most policies by a country mile as far as I could see. I still don't know what many of the other candidates' policies were. So we have a lot of common sense policies. They are common sense, they are pro-British, and they're just truth and honesty. This is the image we want to project, and we will and we can. But we have all these policies, and they are great policies, and they will be great policies, but they're meaningless if nobody hears them. So here's where the I word comes in. We're going to need to grab people's attention if we want them to know what our policies are. And politics, like anything else, is a market. It's a marketplace. You have to compete. And you have to compete with your ideas, and you have to compete with the speeches you give and the language you use, and everything is really important. So if we're going to compete, we need to attract attention. And we're going to attract attention by being the only party in British politics to tell a few harsh truths about the religion of Islam and about the mass migration from the Muslim world, which is coming into Europe. Still thousands of people every single day. We will tell the truth that the jihad terror attacks are actually religious attacks. They come from the religious scriptures. We will tell the truth that the horrible things like child marriage and FGM and all the rest of these horrors come from Islamic scripture. And the reason I want to do that is because I want the British public to know the truth, to be armed with the facts. Only when armed with the facts can the public really decide what direction they want to go in. So at the moment, the lies are confusing people. People are confused about what Muslim immigration, mass Muslim immigration, will mean, because they're convinced that there's only a few extremists, and that's the only problem. And that, when people are convinced of that, your borders stay open. So I want people to know the whole truth, to decide, based on the truth, whether or not they want the borders to stay open. And I pretty much guarantee you that when we get that truth out there, and we will, they won't want the borders open. At the moment, around 47% of this country already wants immigration from Muslim societies banned. And look, I know that sounds really harsh, to ban immigration of a certain group. And it does sound discriminatory. And UKIP is now taking that discrimination line. It is discriminatory, but we should be discriminating. Common sense discriminates. Why on earth wouldn't you discriminate between two completely different types of people with two completely different belief systems? If one of them, if migration is going to come and you have a choice between people who live in societies with cultural practices that are serious criminal offences in your country, or you can have migration from a country with similar values as your own, which one are you going to pick? Why would you not exclude a community which you can see and which you know is going to bring serious criminal offences to your country when you already have a shortage of police resources, when you already have a shortage of Crown Prosecution Service will? Why would you continue to bring crime? Learn from your past and your present and stop it for the future. So it is discriminatory, but it is wise. It is wise to discriminate. So I'm going to, just to give you an update on the party, on how the party is going. Like I said, I'm amazed that we've achieved this much in a few short weeks. And I'm really, and Jan and Neil over here particularly, deserve a great deal of credit for that. But we have achieved a magnificent amount. Today was the first email I sent to all the members of the party, and since today I'm told by the ladies who are in charge of setting up branches, which is our next step, which is what we're doing at the moment, and for those who aren't members yet and didn't receive my email, the next step in our development now is setting up branches. And we have a couple of people in charge of doing that. And on my way down on the train, I got a text message saying, since this morning, we now have branches in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland in just one day. They are growing. And before I sent out this email this morning, we already had a couple of branches in place. Plymouth and Rotherham were the first two. And they had a chap down in Plymouth, ex-military, wants to stand as a candidate for us, wonderful guy. He set up for Plymouth, which I thought was a great idea, and we're going to run with it. So along came for Rotherham. So what we're going to do is have local manifestos by local people for local elections, and we will call it For Plymouth, For Britain. I think it's fantastic. I really do love it, because what we can do is write on our billboards, and our billboards. I'm being very ambitious there. You can see I visualise billboards on the M1. I really do. But what we can do is write "Vote for Plymouth, Vote for Britain." It is fantastic. It really will capture people's imagination. So that is where we are at the moment. We're setting up branches. It's a lot of work, and I say that as someone who isn't doing this work, actually. It has to be worth it. What option do we have? We really don't have any other option now. We have to fight back, and we have to fight back while there's still time. We have to fight back against several things. We have to fight back against this ever more encroaching loony left. And when I say loony left, I mean loony left. I'm not talking about the average Labour voter. I'm talking about the people who used to be sitting out on the fringes. who used to be called crazy, who people used to laugh at. They're now in government, but really, and they call themselves conservatives. I don't want to pick on anyone or bash anyone, but if you look at this trans children thing, the Conservative Party is going along with this. This is how much the rot has set in, that we have a teacher suspended from school for misgendering a pupil. And this was today. You know, and meanwhile, police are still in their jobs who we know looked the other way while girls were being gang raped. This is where we are. This is where we are. We have a complete encroachment on our liberty from the left, from this lunatic left, which, like I say, has come in from the fringes and is now sitting right in Parliament in the form of Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. This is the loony left. Jeremy Corbyn is the loony left. He's a completely anti-British, anti-Western, will support every anti-British terror group he can find and be proud of it. And he could win. He could be the Prime Minister. This is the state we're in. And what have we got to stop him? Theresa May. Theresa May, who can barely hold. I saw a brilliant cartoon today of Theresa May on the phone saying, "Hello, is that IKEA? I need a new cabinet." She certainly does. She certainly does. But, you know, May is holding on by the skin of her teeth from what I can see. And I don't see who's going to replace her. So we have genuine chaos. We have a nobody representing the ordinary, decent British taxpayer in Parliament. They're playing games. They see it as a game. The people are just pawns for them to move around on their game. There's no connection at all with ordinary people. So the loony left is dominating. It's dominating the whole of the public sector. It's dominating education, as we know. And here is key. Because if you want to take over a society, take over its primary schools. Children are being taught from a very young age anti-British sentiment, anti-Western sentiment, being taught from a very young age that they should be ashamed of themselves, that they are personally responsible for colonialism or anything else. And only Europeans, by the way. You'll notice that it's only Europeans who are supposed to pay perpetually for any past crimes. No one else in the world is expected. You won't see the Turks being punished for the Ottoman Empire, but you will see British kids being punished for the British Empire. The trajectory is obvious. The trajectory is obvious. It is a Europe-wide state, single super-state Europe-wide, which Britain is not out of by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't really believe we're getting out of it. I don't really believe we're getting out of it. This is why I said, and I said it all the way through my UKIP leadership campaign as well, I don't think that we can really be free of the EU until the EU is gone. And I think, again, we're in that period of history where it's just possible that we might get rid of it. It's creaking. At the moment, it's creaking at the moment. It has endless troubles at the moment. Sadly, Merkel was re-elected, very sadly. If she had gone, it would have been even shakier. And we could have been in a position to just push it over and get rid of it altogether. But I think we have to aim for that. I'm a person who wants to think big anyway. And I do think big because big things happen. Big things do happen. And we're in a period of change, and I think we ought to push to get rid of this monster altogether, because if we don't, the end result is a European superstate, the end of the nation state, the end of nation state sovereignty, the end of the sovereignty and individuality of the citizen. We will no longer be individuals with individual rights. We will essentially be cogs in the machine, expected to earn and earn and earn, pay the taxes and obey the masters. And the masters will be an unelected clique in Brussels. And what they will do to destabilise us even further and disempower us even further is completely transform Europe beyond all recognition, so that we are no longer safe or we're no longer recognised. You know, we humans have a need for familiarity around us. You know, we need that familiarity of our own people, our own way of life, our own culture. We need sort of even our architecture to look a certain way, our streets to look a certain way, in order to feel at home. It's a human thing. And when that begins to change beyond recognition in front of your eyes, the human instinct will be fear. And you know, trepidation. What is going to happen here? Where are we going to be in 20 years' time? And at the moment, any question is met with a result of racism. with a response of racism. And of course this is what the Soviets used to silence dissent as well. That and you have an illness. You're a racist and you're ill was the Soviet trickery, and they put people in mental hospitals on this basis as well. And you can see this developing with Islamophobia. We're supposed to have something wrong with us if we don't like Islam. We have a phobia. We need to be corrected. And schools are correcting our children. Schools are correcting children. Kids, a harmless little comment from a child now that isn't politically correct can destroy that child's life. And actually, there was a school putting a mark of racist on young children's records because their parents had prevented or objected to them going to a mosque. And I saw this again today as well in Stoke-on-Trent, of all places. Parents are... The local authority there has issued guidance to schools on how to deal with parents who don't want their children to go on mosque visits. And the headline was action being taken to crack down, this was the headline, to crack down on parents who try to block visits to places of worship. Understand, we have to make the British people understand this. We are losing the most fundamental freedoms that we have. And it's going to have to be an enormous, enormous pushback. We're going to have to be very, very brave and very, very strong to carry on this road. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. You might have seen ITV's exposure about me last week. Mostly how I feel about that is a bit embarrassed, actually, because this woman was following me around for months and I didn't know. And you feel a bit foolish. You feel a bit foolish. Yeah, she was around for months. I mean, look, she was never sort of in. She called herself inner circle in the article she wrote in the Huffington Post. This is not true. We were nice to her. That's different. But nobody, as I said the other night, nobody gave her the keys to the safe. She was not heavily involved in anything. But still, it makes you both, it makes you feel a bit foolish, but also makes you feel a bit paranoid and a bit more worried. And then we have to sort of up our game a little bit, which puts us in a dilemma because we want to reach out to people and we want to get as many people as possible on board. But we also have to worry about these devious tactics by the media. I am glad to say that she obviously didn't find me saying anything in private, because I don't say anything differently in private than I say in public. What they did with that documentary was confirm to the British public that they can trust me. And for that, I owe them a great deal. But they did get footage of some rather nasty characters and played me alongside them, thinking that the public doesn't see this trickery. I can tell you, the messages of support I have received since that went out, I've been completely inundated with support. People were joining the party as it was being broadcast. The social media on it, I've read mostly Twitter, but I did glance at Facebook. I'm getting there with Facebook. I never used to know how to use Facebook, but I'm getting there. It's 80–90% on our side. And I'm not talking about just my followers. I went on, for example, on Twitter to the programme's own hashtag and read down the comments, which had nothing to do with me. And it was completely, she's right, she's right, she's right, she's right. This is, and the public know. The public know what they're trying to do. And a huge problem that politicians have, I'll stop in a minute, I promise. A huge problem that politicians have is that they allow themselves to be guided by the media. And here's another big distinction between us and UKIP. UKIP is terrified of the media. I have taken every punch they can possibly land on me, and they no longer bother me. And they no longer bother me because the people are not stupid. And they know perfectly well that ITV hired this known biased organisation, Hard Cash Productions, who brought on Hope Not Hate as their experts. Hope Not Hate. Hope Not Hate go out of their way. I'm sure they've got a special person hired to try and track down dirt on me. They go out of their way to try and discredit me, and they never have. They can't do it. But yet they're brought on as this objective expert. People know they're not stupid. So we are in a time of enormous, enormous change. We're in a time of enormous appetite for truth, for change. People are sick of being lied to. They're sick of being treated like children. They're sick of politicians fobbing them off with some rehearsed line that they've all been given by central office and told to say. They're sick of it. People get this. They're not stupid. Now my plan is, very quickly, my plan is to, from between now and Christmas, I want us essentially to get our ducks in a row. As I said, there's a lot to do. We need to keep setting up branches and get those in place. We need to get, we are already getting people coming in who want to be candidates for us in the local elections in May. We do have people who are now elected candidates for UKIP who will be coming over. The former mayor of Basildon, and he tweeted this today, I'm really pleased, he's a friend of mine, he's coming over in May. So we will start off hopefully with elected people in place. So between now and Christmas I want us to get our branches sorted out. I want to get all the formalities and all the rest of it sorted out. So come January we can hit the ground running and start campaigning. Now I will, one night a week, I will travel to a different part of the country where I will give a public meeting and we will send out leaflets. We'll identify areas where people, for example, where we think we might do well based on demographics and based on past voting. And we'll go there, we'll leaflet, send out about 5,000 leaflets or so, informing local people that we are for Britain, introducing for Britain. We'll tell them in very short words why we're different and why they need to come and hear from us, and we'll have a public meeting. People will come along. They will come along. When I was a parliamentary candidate for UKIP, I held a public meeting and it was full. People actually do like this. They like being included and invited to things, and they like being a part of it. So that is the plan after Christmas, is we will be holding a public meeting in different parts of the country every week, and to get people to give our message to the public, to give out these membership application forms. Membership application forms here. And to build the party, and we will. Exactly the right time for exactly this message. It's exactly the right time, and there's sweeping electoral change across Europe as well. In the Netherlands, in France, in Germany. In Germany, of all. Germany, I thought they were completely destroyed by their own self-hatred. But there's a spark still in Germany, because in the recent elections the AfD went, which is just as strong, by the way, about Islam as I am, if not more, if not stronger. 94 seats in the Bundestag from 0 in one night in Germany, the country we thought would never fight back. There's a glimmer of hope there. Marine Le Pen almost did it in France, and as I say all the time, if the EU hadn't stopped her, hadn't thrown everything they had at her in the last 2 weeks, I think she would have won it. And we see it in the Netherlands as well with Geert Wilders. Britain is no different. You know, people seem to think that the British have somehow missed all this political correctness and all this mass immigration and all this Islam and all this indoctrination of their children in schools. They haven't missed it. They just haven't got anyone to vote for. And the reason they haven't got anyone to vote for is because they either have the politically correct towing the line over here, or they have an option of neo-Nazis on the other side. The people won't vote for groups like that, and I'm glad they won't vote for groups like that, so we will give them someone to vote for. We are not left, we are not right, we are simply people who love this country, who want the truth, who want some common sense instead of ludicrous ideologies, and who want this country to be a country that we know and that we love, and to pass it on to future generations. I want the future British children to grow up in a Britain that is resembling, as recognisable as the Britain we know today. That's it. That's our aim. That's our truth. That's our message. We will combine this with great, strong, common sense policies, and I guarantee you the audience will be there. So please do, if you haven't already, join us by filling in one of these. And I will now take some questions, because I do have to run off at 8:15. Yes, but thank you very much for coming along, and thanks for listening to me.
On the day with the ITV, we actually had people phoning up. I've just watched the programme, I want to join.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
And the thing is, just a point on that, they'll keep doing it. they'll keep trying to hound me. They hounded me throughout the UKIP leadership election, and they've been hounding me since, because they are so bubble. They live in the same bubble as the politicians, and they actually think that by giving me airtime they're going to destroy me and discredit me, because they're so disconnected from public opinion that they don't realise the public is going to agree with me. So they will keep giving me all this airtime. They gave me an hour-long party political broadcast the other night. They really did. I'm delighted. I want students to come forward, and we will start, if a student does come forward, and I think that they will, we will go to that university and ask them for, we'll see however they organise these things, but we'll ask them for a speaking space. When they refuse, we can publicise that, and we can make ammunition out of it. We can embarrass them. We can make this publicly known and the press will be interested in this stuff, again because they're trying to destroy me, but regardless. This is how we will do it. We will put pressure on universities. We will encourage and help students to set up For Britain groups inside the universities, and we'll demand our right to speak. And every time they refuse us, we get more and more of the public on our side, because they'll know that we're being shut down. We are on the outside. We are being bullied. We are being bullied. Anyone with an opinion like ours is being bullied on the national stage. And the more we show this, the more we show the injustice of it, the more the public becomes aware of the injustice of it, the more support we gain. I also want us to go into schools. I've spoken in schools before, we're perfectly within our rights to do so. And anyone above the age of 16 who is interested in helping us do that, I'll certainly pursue it. But the first thing, and something I'm going to focus on and target, is universities and getting our voice heard into universities. And another way, of course, is social media. It sounds a bit, but it's true. You know, most young people are on social media, and we need to, I guess as we go along, I think we've got a fairly decent presence on social media, given how new and young we are. And Sharon, of course, is the Facebook queen for Britain. Thank you, Sharon. I definitely belong. I mean, I don't know how to use Facebook. I really don't. It took me ages to learn to use Twitter, and it's all moving far too fast. So we need other people to look after our presence on social media. But I'm pleased with it for how young we are. But obviously that has to expand. So I want into universities, and I want social media to expand as we grow.
Firstly, I saw your email this morning. I'm going to put my name forward for candidacy and also
Brilliant. Thank you.
Secondly, on that, obviously going back to the university side of things, but there is also another demographic in this country which has basically split our country entirely, and that's Scotland and Wales. Obviously, whispers of independency and stuff like that. Scotland's definitely more vocal on that side of things. Any idea or plan of how we're going to bring them more back into the fold of being a united kingdom instead of split countries?
I think it is a difficult one. I think in terms of Scotland, I think we simply, I don't want us to have, for example, a For Britain Scotland. Yeah. Instead, I want us to have a Glasgow and an Edinburgh, and because if you call it a Scotland, you're already giving the divide. Yes, so we'll keep it UK, and we'll keep it city and area rather than a Scotland and a Wales. That's part of it. But I think the same common sense message will reach Scots and Welsh as it will English. You know, there is a constituency in Scotland who feels as we do, and they're dominated by Labour and the SNP. So I think we've got even greater market in Scotland than we do down here, because who have they got? Actually, I was going to say in England you have the Tories, but
my wife's Scottish, so I get my ear bent by the in-laws all the time about it, and yeah, it's one of those things. I think it's, for want of a better word, it's a market that we can get back into, because they're just as much as they like to put a facade across about Sturgeon and the SNP, they're not that happy with it.
So I keep hearing, every Scot I meet tells me that Sturgeon is
she's just another Labour Conservative. She's not one that spouted everything going about, yeah, we'll give you this, that and the other. It hasn't happened. And they're growing more and more discontent by the day, which is again is where I think we can really
no, there is. There's definitely a market for us in Scotland, but I do think we need to keep it without getting into the Scotland-England thing. Let's keep it. Let's keep
it
that's part of it. But look, we talk about the union in positive terms. I mean, I think a lot of people who will come to us will be pro-union anyway. And remember, the majority of Scots voted to stay in the union. You know, they did. So it's not a complete anti-English mess up there. So I think there's actually a huge market for us in Scotland. We have got, how many members-ish do you know have we got from Scotland?
I don't actually know.
Okay, no, fair enough. We'll put you on the spot there.
Well, I know we definitely do have Scottish members.
Yeah. So, you know, we really just keep the message the same up there as we do down here, and make sure it's a British message. And that in itself, when we keep repeating the Britishness of it, that in itself gives us a unity between Scotland, England and Wales. And that's how we'll talk about it, and that's how we'll address it, as British and not Scottish, English or Welsh. And we keep that, the unity itself is there, and it's obvious and it's ever present, and that'll be who we are. And they're being allowed to do it, even though the same building was refused place of worship status by the same council some years ago. Now they're not refusing it. And the Jewish Chronicle and other Jewish newspapers in London have come out against those protests. You know, they're supporting this massive mosque in the middle of. How can you be so blind? How, you know, they're essentially defending and promoting and supporting and making sure a massive institution which will preach for their genocide will be sit right in the middle of an area that they demographically dominate. This is madness. This is madness. But it's the same. I see it with other people as well. Why aren't women shouting louder about Islam? I mean, for crying out loud, look at how Islam treats women. Why aren't gay people shouting about Islam? It throws them off roofs. You know, but you still have all these groups, and women, gays and Jews are particularly threatened by Islam, and yet you still have all these groups attacking me and defending Islam. It's insane, and it shows the power of the brainwashing by the media. And I think one of the major things about it is that they simply don't want to lose their in-group influence. And I think this is way more significant than we think. Nobody wants to be the person in the room who puts up their hand and says, actually, I don't agree with that. Because we know what will happen. They'll be incessantly and relentlessly bullied. And this is huge. As far as Jews are concerned, I think there's an oppressed minority solidarity kind of thing going on there. Jews seem to be convinced that people like me are the far right. This is, again, the work of the mass media. And that, therefore, all minorities need to unite against us, no matter how clear it is that actually I'm not the threat to minority groups. What I'm opposing is the threat. It will become clear. It will become clear. It's becoming clearer. It's becoming clearer, but it's frustrating. It's frustrating because it's there for everyone to see, and yet people are still just denying it. They're afraid. They're afraid. People are afraid. But you know, we'll have to just keep persevering. Keep persevering. The truth will out. Yeah. The truth will out. It has to.
What would you like people's attitude to be towards things like Rees-Mogg, Farage, and all the other people who are trying to do something? What relationship does For Britain have with other groups that are trying to?
Well,
even
what are they trying to do, though? I mean, look. Every political party does something right. But UKIP has, to me, I mean, look, it's up to you. I've been talking about UKIP as little as I possibly can. I probably could talk about them a lot more, though I don't like talking about them at all. To me, the colours were nailed to UKIP's mast on the day that I lost that election, and they immediately went to the national press and said, we've managed to stop turning into a National Socialist Party. And Farage went to the Telegraph and said, racists almost destroyed UKIP. This to me is unforgivable, and it's unforgivable for a couple of reasons. Not because it's an insult to me, it's because it's sent a message out to the British public once again that if you care about this, you're a Nazi. And this coming from UKIP is extremely, extremely damaging. So to me, when the going got tough, when it was really time, you know, he could have said nothing. They could have said nothing. They could have been gracious about it and just left it and stayed out of it. But instead they went on the offensive after I was defeated and called Nazis. And this gives you an idea of the kind of attitude they have and that they're still pandering to the media. That's how I feel about you. You can all obviously feel what you want to feel. That's how I feel. How I feel doesn't dictate party policy. I'm not a dictator. I'm just a member. But that's how I feel. How other people feel is up to them. But that's how I feel. And I think as a party, UKIP has shown its true colours in this regard.
Do you know why they did that? Do you know why?
Because they were sick of being bullied by the media and decided they wanted someone else to be bullied instead.
We will make America great again.